What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Richard on Data. And if this is your first time here, as I suspect it is for many of you, because it really has been a while here, my name is Richard, and this is the channel where we talk about all things data, data science, statistics, and programming. So subscribe for all kinds of content just like this if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell. That way YouTube notifies you whenever I upload a video. So, again, it has really been a while since I've uploaded over here, but as I read some of the comments that have come through and I read various things that go up on Medium and other publication sites, I'm beginning to sense a bit of overall anxiety about the data science job market. Now, I imagine a lot of that is more global and macroeconomically based. Like, we're sort of coming into this new environment following the pandemic winding down and figuring out what the broader economy looks like after that. So that carries with it all kinds of different changes and I mean, there's all this talk about the Great Resignation going on. People are leaving their jobs. Some jobs are going completely remote. So you've got all that kind of stuff going on. But I'm also beginning to see and hear just talk about data science being automated, I feel like even more than it used to be. So I felt like it's worthwhile to take a deep dive in the data science job market again. Now, Anaconda, that's the #1 data science platform in the world, they do this State of Data Science report every single year. I remember I covered this last year. The link to that will be in the description of this video. But this is a publicly available report. It'll be linked in the description too, and anybody can go here and download this. But it is a really good survey. It's really comprehensive. And just to get a little bit more of an accurate read on what's actually going on in the data science world now, I thought it would be worthwhile to take a deep dive through this. So before we get started here, smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, because that really does help my content reach a larger audience. And also, if you guys would be willing to support my channel, I have links in the description of this video to my Patreon account, as well as to my crypto wallet addresses. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so let's start with some high-level executive summary type of stuff. So, obviously a big focus throughout this entire report is just understanding how data science is changing and evolving following the pandemic. That much should probably be obvious. But how this report was created was through a survey of 4,299 individuals. These people come from more than 140 countries, and this survey was conducted from April 14 to May 5th of 2021. Respondents came from social media, the Anaconda email database, and anaconda.org. Now, ironically, this is a survey about data science, but we have to ask ourselves, first and foremost, was this survey conducted through best data science principles? I guess more specifically, is this a representative sample of the broader data science community? And I would say probably not. I mean, if you look at the inclusion criteria for getting in this survey, I mean, social media, the Anaconda email database, not everybody is going to all these different things. So that's just one consideration, and we'll look at this more when we look at the overall demographic profile here. But I will say it is good that students, academics, and those working in commercial environments are all represented here. So, again, it may not be a perfect representative sample, but when we speculate about what the data science world looks like today and going forward, I don't like to make those kind of guesses in absence of data, obviously, and so this is certainly going to be better than nothing. Now, as we get a little bit more insight into who these people are, we see what countries they're coming from. Blue means 55 plus respondents. As the color gets a little bit greener and more yellow, that means fewer respondents. So we see a lot of representation here, obviously, from the US, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Western Europe, India, Australia, so on and so forth. As we look at respondent age, 50% of people here are in the 25 to 40 age category. So that's cool. I see here that 15% of respondents here have no college whatsoever, and in fact, only 17% have some college. Granted here, though, some people here are in college right now, so keep that in mind. But in various data that I've seen before, though, on the data science community as a whole, like in terms of people working in commercial environments, it seems that about 15% or maybe a little less than that don't have a college degree at all. So I am glad that some people without that are represented here. In fact, though, I do think more than 10% of people in the data science world do have PhDs. So keep in mind that 10% of respondents here have a PhD. So you would think to have a fully representative sample that you probably want to have more than that, but what are you going to do? And so as we look at the primary job functions of our respondents here, the single largest category here are students, but we also see people who are working as data scientists or even as business analysts being represented here. Granted, these are far from the only job roles that you can work in when you're in the data world. So things like cloud engineers, data engineers, developers, line of business managers, good to have their input in here. And there's one of these donut chart things here, just indicating where people are in their current job level. So you've got people who are directors or managers, even at the owner, executive, C-suite, or VP level. And then you got people who are entry level all the way up to senior is typically the next level, followed by principal is kind of that midway jump between being at the senior level and being at some kind of managerial or directorial kind of function. Now, the next section of this report is all about the pandemic and how that specifically impacted data science. And the first question to dive into here is, did the pandemic impact your organization's investment in data science? This is specifically among those respondents who work in some sort of commercial organization. And so for 37% of respondents, they say their organization did experience decreased investment. And personally, throw me in that 37%. I saw this myself. Among everybody else, there was 13% who were not sure, but for 50% of people, that investment stayed the same or actually increased. Now, it's worth taking a deeper look at why individuals said there was a decrease in investment specifically. I want to understand that a little bit more than the increase here, actually. So, unsurprisingly, a lot of this had to do with fiscal, financial reasons. So the company had decreased budget, no team growth, team layoffs, in fact, or they just had project timelines that were put on hold. And so this is not particularly surprising to me, in particular, because for a lot of companies, data science may be sort of more discretionary, or it's put into some sort of research and development kind of category. And I hate this term, but there was all this talk last year about essential workers and who is and isn't that. And where data science falls into that discrete category may differ from one organization to another. And there's also no frame of reference with the 37% of number. Like, is that high? Is that low? Was that more or less than we expected? There's really no good way to answer that question except to look to the future, 2022 and beyond, and speculate that as we see more return to normalcy from more companies, hopefully more companies sort of reach a sort of equilibrium here. They look at their competitors who are succeeding as they dive more into data, and they realize that this is a worthwhile investment. And I'm completely confident that we are in fact going to see that. Again, in 2022 and beyond, as we get further and further out from the impacts of the pandemic. Now, the next thing to look at is, among these individuals who work in some sort of commercial environment, let's understand a little bit more about those people. So we come over here and look at what industries these people are looking in. Right off the bat, as we just look at the number of industries that are listed here, this is really broad. So, right off the bat, the single biggest category is tech at 10% of these respondents, followed by academic, consulting, automotive, banking, engineering. But there's a lot of different industries here that are represented. So that's a really exciting thing. Now, as far as how these people exactly work, as far as what that looks like from day to day, let's start at the bottom here. So, for 19% of people, they are some sort of solo practitioner. So, it'd be a little bit interesting to learn a little bit more about how exactly they're working as a solo practitioner. Like, are they working in their own business? Are they the single data scientist in their company or business analyst or whatever it is in their company? So that's pretty curious to me. But the other 81% of people work in some sort of team. So of that 81%, the single biggest category of them work in a team of 6 to 10 people. That seems to be the biggest group here. Now, again, with the 6 to 10 people here, maybe that's some sort of cross-functional, agile sort of thing. I know that's how I've worked personally in the past, where you could be in a team, but you have analysts, data scientists, product owners, scrum masters, people who are more consulting, on the ground sort of people. But that's not particularly surprising there. Now, as far as where in the organization their data role sort of falls, we've got for 23% of respondents, data science falls into IT. Okay, that's sort of interesting. For 16% of people, data science is regarded as a research and development function. And then for 8% of people, the next biggest category, data science is in some sort of data science center of excellence sort of capacity. Okay. Then as it follows, there's operations, finance. Maybe that one's just removed to me because I've personally never worked in any sort of capacity where I'm in a data science group and then it's under finance. Like that just seems weird and foreign to me, but I guess that's the next biggest category. And then of course we have the really fun, how do data scientists spend their time? Now, I may kind of have to call BS on this particular question because we've got for 22% of people's time that's in data prep and 17% is in data cleansing. So if we kind of bundle those two together, because both of those are sort of similar to me, we've got less than 40% of people's time altogether is spent in the data prepping and cleansing sort of category. Now, the reason I say I may have to call BS on that is I don't entirely believe that one. I mean, if that's actually true, that's absolutely wonderful, and it speaks great volumes to how quality this line of work is and may be going forward. And actually, we'll revisit this a little bit later when we talk about automation. So again, color me a little bit skeptical on that because I file this under the category of almost being too good to be true. Again, if it is true though, that's absolutely amazing. So we've got the next 17% being in reporting and presentation, 15% is in data visualization, and then for the next, let's say 35% here, this is in all sorts of modeling activities. So model selection, model training, and deploying models. So where one of these starts and one of these ends may not necessarily be clear, but speaking of 35% of time falling under the modeling category, is an interesting sort of categorization here. Then, as we talk about getting to production here, as far as where people's concerns are coming from here, we've got 27% reporting that their biggest issue is meeting IT security standards, being that particularly in a lot of industries like healthcare and finance, privacy is a huge issue. This one doesn't surprise me at all. Then we've got a lot of these people reporting concerns as it pertains to recoding models from one language to another. So recoding models from Python or R to another language is a big category, but with only 1% less, so it's not really a significant difference at all. We've got recoding models from another language to Python or R. And there's a breakdown here of how people are reporting that based on what their actual role in their organization is. Now we're going to actually skip ahead to a topic that I think is arguably the most interesting piece of this entire report, which is overall enterprise adoption of open source technologies. So the Pythons, the Rs, the Julias of the world. And so in this question, does your organization allow the use of open source software? A whopping 87% of respondents said yes. Now that's huge to me. That's a really big deal. And so that really tells me, like, the older technologies, like the SaaSes of the world, they may be going the way of the dinosaur here. Hate to say I told you so on that one, but I did tell you so on that one. So, also, 65% of respondents said their employer actively encouraged them and their team to contribute to open source projects. Now, as far as what that actually looks like, that means additional time dedicated to contributing to these sorts of projects, funding specific to development of these sorts of projects, and team members who are dedicated to these contributions. Now, as far as securing the open source pipeline, what does that look like? 45% of these respondents said they use a managed repository. That really makes sense because that cuts down on a lot of reinventing the wheel sorts of things. There's manual checks against a vulnerability database, using a vulnerability scanner, so on and so forth. Now, as far as securing the open source pipeline, security and privacy and things like that are obviously big considerations. And so, as far as the roadblocks that people are reporting for preventing their organization's use of open source, fear of CVEs, that is common vulnerabilities and exposures, that came up, and that doesn't surprise me. Again, places like healthcare and finance and sort of these more old school organizations where privacy and security are of the utmost concern, they are going to be the last ones who are really getting behind open source and just moving 100% of their pipeline to those kinds of technologies. And listen, I get that. And these are things that over time they're going to be worked out over time. There's not wanting to disrupt current projects in place. That's another unsurprising thing. And then just lack of knowledge or understanding. Now, not to be sort of crass here, but a lot of this pertains to sort of just the demographics in age as people come in and out of the data science world, I think. So as you have older generations who are retiring here, for whom open source technologies like Python and R, that just wasn't part of what they were working with. As this is replaced by newer generations who learned Python and R as they were going through school, and they want to apply those skills they learned in their day-to-day work, you are probably going to see those people become leaders and push for that to be more part of just what their company does and how they provide value day to day. So again, that 87% number, I think that's absolutely massive. And as we see the same survey being done in coming years, honestly, that 87% is probably going to become closer to 100%, just as people really see the value that open source provides. Speaking of the value that's provided there, the very next section here is all about Python. Now, people always leave these comments on my videos about, oh, you're an R fanboy. And I make no effort to hide the fact I love R. It will always have a soft spot to me. I actually learned it before I learned Python, and I've been coding in it for about a decade now. And quite frankly, I was educated as a statistician. R was built for statisticians by other statisticians, and so it will always have a soft spot in my heart. That being said, I can't deny, and I don't deny, just how much Python really is catching on in the world right now. And if we look at this breakdown here, they ask respondents how often they use the following languages. I always find these charts kind of hard to read, but there's various categories for how often people are using these things. They get bundled as always, or frequently, or sometimes. And if we add the 34% for always, 29% for frequently, and 22% for sometimes, that means a whopping 85% of respondents here are at least sometimes using Python. You've got 11 plus 4 is 15% of people are rarely or never using Python. But still, that's huge. And the very next most commonly used language, that's SQL, we've got 15 plus 20 plus 27% here. That's 62% of people are at least sometimes using SQL. Then if you look over here at R, and again, I love R, but only 27 plus 25%, that's 52% of respondents, are at least sometimes using R. So there's a huge gap there. I mean, Python is just eclipsing absolutely everything, at least based on this one survey here. And now, if we dig into why that's the case, a big reason here is that 71% of educators are teaching Python, and 88% of students are reporting that they're being taught Python in preparation to enter the data science and ML field. And now, I could be wrong on this one, but I seem to remember seeing and hearing several years ago anyway that Python wasn't really catching on quite as much in the academic world. There was a lot of people in that space who were being taught R, or they were being taught things like Stata or MATLAB or things like that, but Python wasn't really showing up quite as much. And now they say that as the business world adapts, academia seems to adapt a few years later. So as the data science business world changes its needs, academia kind of takes a few years to catch on to that, and they change what they're doing in preparation to get people just ready to contribute in the business world. So we may be starting to see that, and that may be a huge reason why Python is really picking up like this. Now, granted, that's not the only reason, obviously. So you've got things like Python's ease of use, libraries, community, just how easy it is to Google things and find the answers. But another big reason is how important and how easy it is to deploy models into production using the capabilities that are provided using Python. Next section here is all about data literacy and business impact. So the header right up front here is a lack of business knowledge is impacting a data professional's role in business decisions. But when you get into this breakdown here, it doesn't really seem all that bad to me. I mean, we've got 53% of respondents here saying all or many business decisions are based on their or their team's insights. Then for 35%, they say some decisions are based on that. So right up front, that doesn't really sound that bad when you break it down that way. But when you start asking other questions and sort of framing this differently, you start to hear that 36% of people say their organization's decision makers are very data literate and understand the stories told by visualizations and models. But 52% of people say these decision makers need some coaching on the stories told there. No surprise there at all. And 12% of people say their decision makers just flat out have trouble understanding the stories told by data visualizations and models. Again, that doesn't surprise me at all. I tell this story on my channel a lot, but I've run into a very high-ranking stakeholder before who had no idea whatsoever how to interpret a scatter plot. I'm not saying that to make fun of that person at all, but I'm saying that to kind of speak to some people know their business and their domain really well, but they just don't have that education or that training in all these things in the data world. It's just not their education. It's a foreign world to them. And so you're going to have that gap there. So oftentimes there's it's easy to point fingers at people who are data professionals and say, well, they're not experienced enough, they don't know their business and their domain well enough. And to a great extent, that is true. That is one of the motivations that I had actually in starting this channel, was to impress upon people how important the communication and the domain knowledge is. But that understanding does cut both ways. That is, clients or people who are managers at these various organizations that employ these data professionals, there needs to be a lot more understanding from them about the overall value that data professionals provide, as well as just how to interpret things like visualizations and models. That ultimately these things are complex. The idea is to boil complex things down to things that are more simple, and that's things that all data professionals could probably get a little bit better at. But my broader point here being that misunderstanding there can kind of cut both ways here. Now, as we dive a little bit deeper into what's limiting our respondents' ability to impact business decisions based on their job function, the number one thing that people are reporting here is that business priorities shift quickly. And I'm sure those of you like myself who've worked in data science capacities for a while can relate to this one. Maybe you've worked on a project for a while, it's really cool, you're making progress, and then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under you and you've got to go do something else. So that kind of thing happens. Now for these next two, I have to wonder, there may be a little bit of a response bias with this one, because you've got, for one category, which people are reporting a lot more, you've got decision makers at my organization struggle with data literacy. And then for the next category, you've got I or my team can't effectively demonstrate business impact. So I have to wonder with this one. Again, I've already pointed out that just there being miscommunication and issues from people who work as data professionals to the people that they're reporting to. There's probably a little bit of a gap on both sides there, and both people can do better there. But it's also probably easier to point fingers, like in the case here, rather than to say, oh, it's me who can't really effectively demonstrate business impact. So I have to wonder a little bit about kind of the bias of that's in effect there. So just something to think about there. Though, like I said, it cuts both ways. Then we've got skills gaps and how they're impacting decision making. And so here, I like to look at the gap between what enterprises lack and then what students are learning or what universities are offering. So, no surprise here, enterprises don't seem to be lacking advanced mathematics as much as universities are offering them. And so, I can relate to this one in the sense that I learned all about minimum variance, unbiased estimators in the academic world. Can't say I've ever used that piece of information in a commercial environment. So there seems to be a gap between enterprises needing big data management and then universities offering big data management here, or business analytics, or business knowledge. These seem to be some pretty big areas of just there being a gap there. And now let's talk about the future of work. Okay. So, specifically data science work, but this is one of those things that ties into the broader macroeconomic environment here. So, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, data science is listed in the top 15 fastest growing occupations, and it's projected to have a 31% job growth over the next 10 years. So they always say in the financial and investing world that past performance does not indicate future returns, and certainly that applies here. But if the past is any indicator of the future, then I'd say that job growth is probably going to be significantly higher than 31%. That's just my guess here. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm leaning on that one. Now, there's all this talk out there in the economic world right now about the Great Resignation. People are leaving their jobs and they're going to other places where they feel more fulfilled. And this ties into remote work too, which is more of a thing that people are being allowed to do. I could do a whole video about the topic of remote work, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. But a big takeaway here is 32% of respondents in the survey are looking for a job in the next 6 to 12 months. So I've heard 40% of people in the entire economic world out there, but 32% of people is still a lot. And I will say, data scientists tend to be, on average, more well paid and more, and just people with a lot more options than your average person in the job market. And a lot of that has to do with the supply and demand gap. There is more demand for data professionals in the job market than there is supply there. So it gives data professionals a lot of leverage and a lot of power, quite frankly. So there was a question about which of the following do you think best describes how leadership perceives your role? So for 38% of people, these data professionals say leadership perceives them as people who explore data and ask questions and build models that lead to better decision making. That's a good answer. We've got the go-to person for all things data, reporting, and analytics. That's a big time red flag. That's not the position that you want to be in, because that's overwhelming and that's unsustainable. That's what we call unicorn syndrome. And we've got people who build AI and machine learning applications. That's only 22%. Then we've got another red flag here. That's my data science work is valued, but they don't understand what I do. That's not good, because if leadership doesn't understand what you do, you're not going to feel valued or empowered in the kind of work that you do, and it's going to lead to problems one way or the other, no matter how high your salary is. Then as far as the student respondents out there, what's their biggest obstacle to obtaining experience required for a career in data science? So the single biggest category that people are reporting is finding an internship. And it is one of those catch-22 situations out there, unfortunately, where you sort of need a job to get a job, but you can't get a job because you never had a job in the past. So that comes down to one of those instances where if you're a student, it really is a numbers game, and you just have to keep chugging away at it. Keep trying, and eventually I'm confident it is going to work out for you. And it comes down to some of these same economic factors that influence the data science world in general. There is more demand for data science than there is supply of people who can do that kind of work. And there's a lot of organizations who, frankly, they're growing and they want to resort to cheaper labor. That is, it costs a lot less to hire an intern than it is a full-time worker. And so as we recover more from pandemic land and we go back to normalcy more and more, hopefully this problem gets alleviated more and more. And now as we start winding this report down, there are some big questions in the data science and the machine learning and the AI spaces as a whole. So question is, what respondents felt was the biggest problem to tackle in AI and machine learning? And so the number one response here was social impacts from bias in data and models. More on that in a moment as we talk about what bias actually entails, because that's broader than a lot of people realize if they're brand new to this stuff. Then there was impacts to individual privacy. That's a really hot topic in the tech world right now. Then there's a reduction in job opportunities caused by automation. And so, as we ask the question, is your data science team planning to take any steps to ensure fairness and mitigate bias, or to address model explainability, like how you actually come up with this model in the first place, and then what's what's suitable interpretation for said model. I think you can go through the results here and you see 30% of people are planning to take more steps to address bias mitigation in the next 12 months, and 31% for model explainability and interpretability. Now, they state here that is a 7% increase from 2020 as far as the bias mitigation number is concerned. And so it's really important just to remind yourself here, or if you're brand new to data science as a whole, that all data has an unintentional bias insofar as how it's collected and how it's analyzed and just how it's filtered and all these things like that. These are things which represent major assumptions, and these assumptions do create, whether they're unintentional or intentional, sorts of bias in the analysis. And these are things that just downstream just affect all aspects of the process, whether that's in model building or whether that's in just explaining the results. And so just understanding how robust your results are to these assumptions or to these biases, understanding how these things affect your results in the first place, these are very, very big issues. So no, that's a good thing that we're having these conversations and talking about them. And then, of course, we have to cover something that I thought was absolutely fascinating, which is the sentiment toward auto-ML in data science. So, actually, it's not just auto-ML, it's automation in general. That is, the process of automating tasks involved in applying machine learning to real-world problems in data science. So, actually, 55% of respondents hope to see more automation and auto-ML in data science. 41% of people had no strong feeling toward automation. But then only 4% of people are concerned about how automation and auto-ML may impact data science. So this is really interesting to me. This is another one of these kind of I told you so moments on my end, where I've been telling you on this channel for a while that don't hold out in fear about your job in data science being replaced by automation. My grand thesis has always been, yes, there are certain tasks in data science which are going to get automated away, but this opens up more time just in people's worlds where instead of just spending all this time doing repetitive tasks that can be automated, you can reinvest that time to do other, just more interesting things, quite frankly, and then down the road, solving more complex problems. And so probably as automation grows, you're probably going to see more job opportunities in the data science world. That's what I think, and I'm going to have a big confirmation bias moment here as I see these results here. But to be fair, I want to explore this just a little bit more. So the next question here is, what is the biggest myth about data science? So the single biggest thing that people responded here was that data scientists will be replaced by artificial intelligence soon. People are saying that's a big myth. Well, but wait a second. So if we look back up here, there was this question about what our respondents felt was a problem to tackle in AI and machine learning, and there was a reduction in job opportunities caused by automation. That didn't seem to be a big thing that people were responding to that question. Only 19% of people said that was the biggest problem. But at the same time, only 4% of respondents are having a negative perception about automation and auto-ML, and 33% of people are saying that data scientists being replaced by AI soon is a myth. So my read on this, as I try to reconcile all these numbers, is that people in the data science world aren't necessarily worried about their own jobs and their own work, but a lot of it has to do with automating away other people's jobs. So if you think about it, just to give some examples here, people things like self-driving cars. There's a lot of automation there. Maybe there's automation around taking people's orders at a fast food joint, or just things like that. necessarily as that kind of technology just evolves. So automation is coming more into play there as data scientists are building out new products and services and uh, hopefully helping to pad the business's bottom line there. But there is a big social impact there where, yeah, that's great for a data scientist. They have a job doing that. But instead of having a delivery driver or an Uber driver or just somebody who's taking your order over the phone or in person at a fast food location, all of a sudden a machine is doing that work instead of an actual human being, and so there's fewer jobs available to all those other people. Believe me, I understand that. That is a huge concern. That's kind of it's easy to look at that as a not my problem kind of thing as a data scientist, but you don't want to be that person. You want to understand the social impact as data scientists, as data science and artificial intelligence involves. There is a broader societal cost to that. So it's just something to keep in mind, and it's just my read as I see all these numbers about how all these things come together. But if you are a data scientist and you're worried about your own job, though, again, I've maintained for a while I wouldn't be. Data science will be around for a while, and frankly, I think automation is just going to make it even more enjoyable for you. And so Anaconda here wrapped up the report by summarizing 4 big themes for enterprises to focus on. Number 1, Python will continue to dominate the data science field and beyond. I see no evidence to the contrary of that. That seems pretty clear to me. Number 2, enterprises are ready to contribute to open source innovation. That's enormously exciting. That was the single biggest takeaway to me here. Number 3, sentiment toward automation will continue to grow. Again, all kinds of considerations with that I just rambled about for a while. And then number 4, preventing bias and developing ethical data science is critical. Again, just my take on that is always think about whenever you do any kind of data analysis, regardless of how simple or complicated it is, always think about what kind of assumptions are at play in that analysis. What assumptions did you make, whether you're thinking about them or not? What impact do those assumptions have? And what's the impact of the work that you're doing in the first place? So how is your work actually going to be used? These are all incredibly valuable questions. And huge credit to Anaconda here for conducting this survey, putting this report together, and even with concluding with these big themes. I thought this was a fascinating report, and there are some really, really interesting takeaways here. So I'm going to leave it all there. Let me know in the comments down below, like, what your biggest takeaways here are. Again, this report will be linked in the description. Feel free to read it, and just let me know down below what you thought. So I'll leave it there. Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and then I'll see you all in the not so distant future. Until then, Richard, on data.